Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to delve into the life of a really fascinating figure in early Islamic history, Zubayr ibn Awam.
Definitely a name that resonates through history.
And we're super lucky to have Dr. Omar Suleiman's lecture to guide us on this journey.
A great source. Really brings him to life.
So jumping right in, one thing that really struck me was how young Zubayr was when he embraced Islam.
Oh, absolutely. Just 15 years old. Imagine the courage it took to go against the grain like that, especially back then in Mecca.
Right, like his own family, a prominent Meccan family, was opposed to Islam.
Yeah, and it wasn't just disapproval. The lecture even talks about how he was subjected to torture.
By his own uncle.
It's crazy to think about the strength he must have had at that age to withstand that pressure, but it kind of sets the stage for, well, everything that comes after. His unwavering loyalty.
His bravery on the battlefield.
Yeah, it's like those early trials really forged something in him.
Speaking of loyalty, his dedication to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was legendary.
Oh, absolutely. He was like a guardian, always ready to defend the Prophet, even in the most dangerous situations.
I remember that story from the lecture about him being one of the first to shield the Prophet in Mecca, when the opposition was at its peak.
Yeah, incredible. It's like, what kind of bond creates that level of selflessness?
Right. And then there's the nickname the Prophet gave him, the disciple.
Wow, yeah. More than just a nickname, wouldn't you say? It speaks to a depth of connection, a level of trust.
Absolutely. I think it suggests that Zubair was not just following blindly, but truly understanding the Prophet's vision.
Trying to learn from him, absorb those teachings. And it wasn't just theoretical either.
Oh, yeah.
The lecture mentions how Zubayr played this crucial role in verifying the safety of those Muslims who sought refuge in Abyssinia.
Oh, right. There was so much uncertainty back then.
Exactly. So, limited communication, rumors flying, and Zubayr steps up and undertakes this dangerous journey.
It shows the depth of his care, not just for the Prophet, but for the whole Muslim community.
Yes, and it even earned him, well, heartfelt gratitude from the Prophet's wife, Saffiyah. Her family was in Abyssinia, so she was particularly concerned.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we see this unwavering loyalty, this profound care for the community. But we can't forget that he was also, well, this incredibly strong warrior.
Oh, absolutely. Physically imposing, too. Dr. Suleiman describes him as tall, muscular, with this long, flowing beard.
Like larger than life.
And those physical attributes were matched by his incredible skill and courage on the battlefield.
He was renowned for his horsemanship.
Wielding two swords.
Two swords, with incredible dexterity.
Dr. Suleiman even refers to him as a lion in the battlefield. Just really emphasizing that fierceness.
It's almost like you're stepping into a movie scene when you hear about him charging into battle, sword flashing. What stands out to you about his military achievement?
Well, where do we even begin? I mean, his bravery in the Battle of Badr is a classic example, a turning point for the early Muslims. And he was right there on the front lines.
That's right. It was a turning point. Breaking through enemy ranks, causing chaos.
Exactly. And there's this moment in the lecture where Dr. Suleiman describes him challenging and defeating one of the enemy commanders in single combat.
Ubaidah ibn Sa'id, I think it was.
Yeah. Talk about a bold move. I mean, he wasn't just a fearless fighter. He was a smart tactician,
Right.
knew how to turn the tide of battle.
And wasn't there something about securing a water source during Badr, too?
That's right. It wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring the survival of his people, thinking long term, even in those intense moments.
It really shows that blend of courage, strategic thinking, and foresight that, well, made him such a formidable leader.
A force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, that's for sure.
And his impact, it went far beyond individual battles. He was involved in so many campaigns that contributed to the expansion of the early Muslim community.
Yeah. Makes you wonder what motivated him to fight so relentlessly. I mean, was it purely duty or was there something more?
That's a good question.
Dr. Suleiman hints at a deeper motivation. Zubayr was one of the very first to embrace Islam. He saw those early struggles, the persecution, the sacrifices.
Right. He was there from the beginning.
So it's possible he saw these conquests as a way to secure the future of the very community he helped build.
That's a really powerful thought. It wasn't just about territory. It was about safeguarding the future of Islam itself.
Exactly. And it's interesting, Dr. Suleiman points out how Zubayr even named his children after key figures in the early Muslim community, like Abu Bakr.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
Like he was intentionally creating this lineage.
Connecting his family to those core values.
To ensure its continuity.
It's subtle, but but powerful. Shows that dedication to building a strong and lasting Muslim community. Not just through battles, but through his family life, too.
It's another dimension to his story. We see this fierce warrior, this loyal disciple, but also this thoughtful family man, building a legacy that extends far beyond his own lifetime.
A man constantly striving for something greater.
Always reaching for a higher purpose.
Now, there's this story in the lecture about a siege, and I got to hear you tell it again.
Oh, you mean the one where he scales the wall?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So the prophet was leading this campaign, right, against a group hostile to the Muslims.
Okay.
And they were facing like really fierce resistance from this heavily fortified fortress.
Oh, wow.
So Zubayr, known for his daring, decides to take matters into his own hands.
He climbs the wall.
Single-handedly. Breaches the enemy's defenses, creates an opening for the Muslim army to enter. It was a huge risk.
What a bold move. It sounds almost like something out of a movie.
But it paid off, led to a decisive Muslim victory.
You know, it seems like he had this incredible knack for assessing risk, seizing opportunities, not just with brute force, but with his calculated bravery.
It wasn't recklessness, it was strategic.
Wow.
And you see that same boldness in another incident that Dr. Suleiman talks about.
What's that?
When Zubair challenged the decision to distribute war spoils unequally, he felt it was unfair.
Wow. To challenge the prophet. That takes serious guts.
It does. He wasn't afraid to speak truth to power, to stand up for what he believed was right, even if it meant, potential backlash.
It shows a strong moral compass.
Exactly. And while the prophet explained his reasoning, the fact that Zubayr felt comfortable enough to voice his dissent, well, it speaks volumes about their relationship, built on mutual respect. Open communication.
It's a really humanizing moment, right?
Yeah.
Showing that even these revered figures engaged in honest dialogue.
Disagreements, yeah. Even disagreements. It's a valuable lesson for us, I think, in how to navigate our own relationships, how to challenge authority respectfully.
And this theme of challenging authority, standing up for what's right, it becomes even more prominent during the fitna, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. That turbulent period of civil war within the early Muslim community, imagine being caught in the middle of that. Torn between loyalties.
So much uncertainty.
And yet, Dr. Suleiman highlights that despite the pressure to choose a side, Zubayr desperately sought a peaceful resolution. He was deeply disturbed by the bloodshed, the division.
So he remained true to his character. Diplomacy over aggression, even when surrounded by conflict.
Exactly. He advocated for dialogue, reconciliation, reminded everyone of the Prophet's teachings, the importance of brotherhood. It was a valiant effort trying to hold on to unity when everything seemed to be falling apart.
It's a reminder that true leadership isn't always about wielding a sword, but sometimes about wielding words of peace.
Absolutely. It makes his eventual fate even more tragic, wouldn't you say?
You're talking about his assassination.
Yeah. During that period of turmoil, it really underscores the complexities and the dangers of political conflict, even within a community supposedly unified by faith. Dr. Suleiman's description of his death is really heartbreaking, especially his last words and the grief of those who found him.
Before we get into that, though, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier that really struck me. His horsemanship.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Suleiman describes it almost mythically.
Right. And you have to remember, back then, horsemanship wasn't just a hobby. It was a vital skill, especially in warfare.
And Zubair was said to have this almost supernatural connection with horses, controlling them with such ease and grace.
It sounds like he was one with the horse, able to move so swiftly, dodge attacks, launch surprise offensives.
It must have made him an even more formidable opponent on the battlefield.
Oh, absolutely, adding a whole other dimension to his fighting prowess.
Imagine this wave of horsemen thundering across the battlefield, led by Zubair, this figure of unwavering courage and determination.
I can only imagine how terrifying that must have been for his enemies.
But it wasn't just about spectacle. Dr. Suleiman highlights how that mastery allowed him to wield his weapons with even greater force and accuracy.
Making him an even more dangerous opponent.
And he could lead cavalry charges with incredible effectiveness. Imagine seeing your commander, someone with Zubair's reputation, leading the charge. It would instill tremendous confidence in his troops.
And terror in his enemies.
Exactly. But it wasn't just brute force either. He used his horsemanship strategically, assessing the battlefield, identifying weaknesses, exploiting them, always one step ahead.
Really a testament to his dedication, his skill. It wasn't just a tool of war, it was an art form.
Exactly. A way of expressing his mastery of both physical prowess, and strategic thinking.
It might seem like a small detail, but it reveals so much about his character, doesn't it? His leadership, his impact.
It's those little details that can offer the most profound insights, I think. And as we continue exploring his life, I'm sure we'll find many more that illuminate his complexities.
Okay, so we've covered his incredible loyalty, his military prowess, his willingness to speak truth to power. But we also need to remember that he was a human being
Yeah.
with personal struggles, moments of vulnerability.
Oh, absolutely. And Dr. Suleiman doesn't shy away from those aspects. He talks about a particularly harrowing episode, the siege of his home during the fitna.
Ah, right, when he refused to take sides. It's a reminder that even those who strive for peace can become victims of violence, of political maneuvering.
It was brutal. Soldiers surrounding his house, demanding his surrender. They harassed him, his family, cut off their supplies, threatened their lives. And it went on for months.
It must have been agonizing for him. Always a man of action, now trapped, unable to protect his loved ones.
He drew strength from his faith, his family. He prayed, rationed their supplies, never gave up hope.
And he tried to reason with the soldiers, right?
He did, reminded them of the prophet's teachings about unity and compassion, but they were blinded by rage, determined to break him.
Even facing that kind of adversity, he never wavered in his commitment to peace. It's really inspiring.
It is. It shows he wasn't just a warrior, but a man of principle, refusing to compromise his values, even when his life was on the line.
And it was his concern for his family that ultimately led him to leave his home, wasn't it?
Exactly. He knew by staying he was putting them in danger, so he chose to sacrifice his own safety for theirs, embarked on that journey to Mecca, hoping to find refuge.
And of course, we know that journey ended tragically.
It does. With his assassination, a heartbreaking reminder that even the most well-intentioned actions can have unintended consequences, especially in the midst of such turmoil.
But even in his death, his commitment to peace, his willingness to sacrifice himself for his family, it's a powerful testament to his character.
Absolutely. And they offer us these valuable lessons about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, and about the power of love and family, even in the face of the unimaginable. You know, it's fascinating how Zubayr handled that whole fitna situation.
Yeah, it really puts his character to the test, doesn't it?
It does. This man known for decisive action, loyalty, and he finds himself in a situation demanding, well, a different kind of courage. The courage to stand for peace when everyone's picking sides.
It's a stark contrast to the battlefield.
Totally. Instead of leading the charge, he's trying to bridge the divide, appealing to reason, shared values. Dr. Suleiman even mentions this instance where Zubayr and some other companions, they try to mediate between the warring factions. A bold move, stepping into that peacemaker role, but ultimately unsuccessful.
It makes you think, what was going through his mind, watching the very community he'd fought so hard to build, tearing itself apart?
It must have been incredibly disheartening, seeing those divisions deepen, despite his efforts. But even in the face of failure, he never gave up on peace.
That's really saying something.
It is. True strength isn't always about winning battles. It's about holding on to your principles, even when the world's crumbling around you.
And I think that unwavering commitment to peace, it's something we can all learn from.
Absolutely. A reminder that there's always another way. Dialogue, understanding, even when things seem hopeless.
Even though his assassination robbed the Muslim community of, well, a powerful voice for peace, the fact that he tried, that he never gave up hope, it's a testament to his belief in reconciliation.
A legacy worth remembering, especially today when division and conflict seem so prevalent.
Okay, so we've talked about his military achievements, his unwavering loyalty, his peacemaking attempts during the fitna, but what about his personal life? What kind of man was he outside of these grand historical events?
That's something Dr. Suleiman doesn't shy away from. Beyond the warrior, the politician, we see glimpses of a man who deeply valued family, relationships. He was married to Asma bint Abi Bakr.
The daughter of the first caliph.
Exactly. Talk about a power couple. Their families were deeply intertwined with, well, the very foundation of the Muslim community.
It really adds another layer to his story.
It does. Imagine the conversations they must have had, the challenges they faced together as the Muslim community navigated those early years.
It makes it all more real, more relatable. Not just abstract historical events, but, well, real people living through them, forming families, raising children.
And speaking of children, Dr. Suleiman points out Zubayr was a devoted father to his many children, including his son Abdullah, who went on to play a significant role in Islamic history.
Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Wasn't he the one who led a resistance movement against the Umayyad Caliphate?
That's the one. Leadership runs in the family, it seems. But beyond political legacies, Dr. Suleiman emphasizes Zubayr's commitment to his children's upbringing, instilling in them those Islamic values: honesty, integrity, compassion.
It's like a picture of a man who, despite all his responsibilities, made time for his family, actively shaping the next generation.
And don't forget Asma. She was known for her own strength, intelligence, a true partner in navigating those challenging times. It makes you appreciate the support system they had, the strength they grew from each other during those, well, those turbulent early years of the Muslim community.
It humanizes them, reminds us that even the most prominent figures in history had personal lives, loved ones who shared their burdens, celebrated their victories.
Exactly. It's those personal connections, those intimate moments that make history come alive. Allow us to see them not as names in a textbook, but as real people who loved, laughed, struggled, and triumphed.
A perspective we often lose sight of, focusing on the grand sweep of events.
It's those personal details that ground us. Remind us that they were individuals just like us, experiencing the full spectrum of human emotions.
And in Zubayr's case, those details reveal a man who, despite being caught in the midst of those historical upheavals, never lost sight of family, loyalty, personal integrity. A legacy extending beyond the battlefield, the political arena. It speaks to what it means to be human.
Absolutely.
Now, Dr. Suleiman mentioned something else about Zubair, something that really intrigued me, his sense of humor.
Yes. Even amidst the seriousness of his endeavors, it seems Zubair had a lighter side. Dr. Suleiman doesn't go into specific jokes or anecdotes,
Right.
but he emphasizes that it was a gentle humor, almost mischievous, never cruel, never dismissive.
Makes you wonder what it was like to be in his presence, to see that playful side emerge. Did it put people at ease? Help diffuse tension?
It's fascinating to imagine maybe it was a way of coping with those pressures of leadership, finding moments of joy. It certainly adds complexity to our understanding of him.
It's a reminder that even the most serious figures, the most heroic figures, are still human, capable of laughter. Lightheartedness, it makes them more real, more relatable.
Exactly, and it's a good reminder for all of us. We don't have to be somber and serious all the time to be effective, to have an impact. A little humor can go a long way.
It can. And speaking of impact, let's talk about one of Zubair's most significant contributions, his role in the conquest of Egypt.
Yes, a pivotal moment in early Islamic history, a major expansion of the Muslim world.
So what was Zubair's part in all of this?
Well, Dr. Suleiman highlights him as one of the leading commanders in the Muslim army that marched into Egypt. And this was no small feat. They were facing the mighty Byzantine Empire, who had ruled Egypt for centuries.
High stakes. This wasn't just a border skirmish, it was a clash of empires.
Exactly. And Zubayr, with his military expertise, his ability to inspire his troops, played a crucial role in securing that Muslim victory. He led several key battles, including the Battle of Ain Shams, a turning point in the campaign. He also played a significant role in the siege of Alexandria, the capital of Byzantine Egypt.
It must have been incredible to witness his leadership, those tense moments strategizing with his commanders, rallying his troops for battle.
And remember his horsemanship. Picture him leading the charge, a figure of strength, determination, inspiring his soldiers, striking fear into the hearts of his enemies. It's like a scene straight out of an epic poem.
It's easy to get caught up in the grand narrative, but it's those individual acts of courage, leadership that really shape things. And Zubair was right there at the center.
He was, and his role in the conquest of Egypt cemented his reputation as, well, a brilliant military leader, someone capable of not only winning battles, but expanding the reach of the early Muslim community.
It was a defining moment for him and for the future of Islam. But I think it's important to pause here and consider a question that often comes up when we discuss conquests like this. What were the motivations behind them?
That's a crucial question, and one that deserves nuanced consideration. It's easy to fall into those simplistic interpretations, assuming it was all about power or greed. But Dr. Suleiman hints at something more complex.
Like what?
Well, remember, this was a time when the early Muslim community was facing significant persecution. They were a relatively new and vulnerable group, surrounded by powerful empires who often saw them as a threat. There was a need to secure their safety, to establish themselves as a force to be reckoned with.
So there was an element of self-defense, protecting their community from external threats.
Absolutely. But there was also the strong belief in the universality of Islam's message. They believed they had a duty to share those teachings with the world, invite others to embrace those principles of peace, justice, submission to God.
So it wasn't just about conquest for the sake of conquest. There was a genuine belief in what they were doing, a desire to, well, spread their faith, create a more just and equitable world.
Exactly. And while we can debate those complexities, it's important to recognize that they saw their actions as, well, divinely inspired, as part of this larger plan to establish a just and righteous society.
It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white.
It isn't. There are always those multiple layers of motivations, justifications, and it's our job to try to understand them within that historical context.
Okay, so we've explored his military achievements, his family life, those motivations behind the conquests. But there's another aspect we haven't really touched on yet, his political views. Dr. Suleiman hints that Zubayr had some strong opinions on governance, leadership. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it seems Zubayr wasn't just content with following orders or carrying out campaigns. He was interested in the principles that guided the Muslim community, the very foundations of its political structure.
So he wasn't just a warrior, but a thinker, someone engaged with the bigger picture of how society should be run.
Exactly. And his views were shaped by his understanding of Islam, his relationship with the Prophet. He believed in a system of governance based on consultation, where leaders sought the input, the advice of the community.
Not authoritarian then, more collaborative.
Precisely. He felt leaders had this responsibility to listen to their people, to consider their needs, concerns, make decisions that reflected the collective good. He also strongly believed in justice, fairness, ensuring everyone, regardless of social standing, was treated with dignity, respect.
It sounds like he was advocating for a system that prioritized the community's well-being above all else.
That seems to be a theme throughout his life, doesn't it? On the battlefield, personal relationships, his political views, he consistently sought to uphold justice, promote the well-being of those around him. A powerful example of how faith can translate into action, how personal values can shape that vision for a better society.
It's a reminder that political engagement isn't just about power struggles, strategic maneuvering. It can be about a genuine desire to create a more just and equitable world.
Absolutely. And Zubayr's story offers some valuable insights into those complexities of early Islamic political thought, showing how individuals grappled with the challenges of building a new society based on their understanding of faith and justice.
So we see this multifaceted figure, the warrior, the loyal companion, the family man, the peacemaker, and now the political thinker. It's clear Zubayr wasn't content with just playing a single role. He engaged with the world around him on so many levels, striving to make a difference wherever he saw a need.
And that's what makes his story so compelling. He wasn't confined to one narrative, one historical category. He was complex, dynamic, constantly seeking to push the boundaries of his own potential.
It's a reminder that we don't have to limit ourselves to a single identity, a single path. We can embrace our own complexities, passions, and beliefs to create a life of meaning.
Exactly. And as we delve further into Zubayr's story, I think we'll find even more inspiration in his multifaceted approach to life, his willingness to embrace those challenges, and his unwavering commitment to his values.
Now let's talk about this nickname he had, the Disciple. It's not just a casual moniker. It speaks volumes about his relationship with the Prophet, the role he played.
It does. This title, bestowed by the Prophet himself, recognizing Zubayr's unique blend of loyalty, eagerness to learn, and unwavering dedication. He embodied what it meant to be a true follower.
So it wasn't about blind faith, but about active engagement, a thirst for knowledge, a commitment to living by those principles.
Exactly. And Dr. Suleiman suggests it wasn't just a personal honor, but a reflection of that crucial role he played in the early Muslim community. He wasn't just a follower, he was a leader, an example.
So it's about his impact, inspiring others with his actions, his dedication.
Think about it. Here's this young man, one of the first to embrace Islam, facing persecution, hardship, yet his commitment never wavers. He's constantly striving to learn, to grow, to embody those teachings in every aspect of his life. It's a powerful example for that nascent community.
He represents the ideal, the embodiment of what a true Muslim should be. Courageous, loyal, compassionate, dedicated to justice. It's no wonder he earned that title.
And it continues to resonate today, reminding us that true discipleship isn't just about passive belief, ritualistic practice. It's about actively engaging with your faith, seeking knowledge, striving to live by its principles.
It's about having that courage to stand up for what's right, that compassion to help those in need, and the dedication to make the world a better place, qualities we can all aspire to.
Well said. And a fitting tribute to Zubayr ibn Awwam, the disciple. a man whose life and legacy continue to inspire.
Okay, so we've talked about his loyalty, his leadership, his political views, his family life, even his sense of humor. But there's one aspect of his story we haven't really delved into yet, his assassination.
Ah, yes, the tragic end to a remarkable life. And as Dr. Suleiman points out, it not only marks the end of Zubair's journey, but also a turning point in the fitna itself, further fueling that chaos, the division.
It's almost like a microcosm of the whole conflict. This man known for strength, decisiveness, his commitment to peace, ultimately brought down by the very violence and division he tried to overcome.
The way Dr. Suleiman describes it, Zubair traveling through this desolate area, ambushed by soldiers who've been misled by false information. He fights back even though he's outnumbered, outmatched. It's heartbreaking. This warrior brought down not in glorious combat, but by deceit, betrayal.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. How easily even the most well-intentioned individuals can become victims of misinformation.
And it raises so many questions. Who benefited from his death? Was it calculated? Or just a tragic consequence of that chaos, that confusion? Dr. Suleiman leaves those questions open, inviting us to consider the complexities.
It's a reminder that history isn't always a neat and tidy narrative.
It isn't. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's often driven by forces we may never fully understand.
But even in that messiness, amidst that tragedy, there's something profoundly moving about his final moments. Dr. Suleiman recounts how, as he lay dying, his thoughts weren't of revenge, of bitterness, but of peace, forgiveness. He was concerned about his debts, about ensuring he hadn't wronged anyone.
It really is a testament to his character, that unwavering commitment to his values, even in the face of death.
It's a powerful reminder that true strength lies not in inflicting violence, but in the ability to forgive, to choose compassion over hatred, even in our final moments.
Absolutely. A legacy worth reflecting on, especially today, when violence and retribution often seem like those default responses.
Zubayr challenges us to consider a different path, a path of peace, understanding, and forgiveness, even when those qualities seem impossible.
And while his life was cut short, the impact of his choices, his commitment to his principles, continues to resonate. He may not have achieved that lasting peace he sought, but his story serves as an inspiration for those who continue to strive for a better world. So as we delve into the details of his assassination, the aftermath, let's keep this in mind. Zubayr ibn Awam was a man who, despite facing unimaginable challenges, never lost sight of peace, justice, compassion, values worth fighting for. Even when the odds seem insurmountable, it really makes you think, doesn't it? How Zubayr's story still resonates today.
It does, centuries later, and it still makes us question our own values, our choices.
It speaks to how relevant these figures from early Islamic history still are. They weren't just shaping events, they were dealing with these fundamental human questions that we still face. Questions of loyalty, justice, the use of power.
Right, and their struggles, it's like they provide a guide for navigating our own moral dilemmas. And what strikes me is Zubayr wasn't just passively following along. Dr. Suleiman really emphasizes how he was always challenging himself, pushing those boundaries of his own understanding, his commitment.
Like, take that story about him challenging the distribution of war spoils.
Yeah, a perfect example. His commitment to justice clashing with his respect for the Prophet's authority.
He could have easily stayed silent.
He could have, but he chose to speak up, advocate for what he believed was right, even if it meant, disagreeing with the Prophet.
Risking his displeasure.
It shows incredible courage, intellectual honesty.
He wasn't just blindly following, he was really engaging with those principles he was fighting for.
It's like he understood that true faith requires more than just obedience. It demands that active questioning.
That willingness to grapple with the difficult stuff, to hold those in power accountable.
Even when it's uncomfortable, and that willingness to challenge authority, even someone you deeply respect. It's a lesson for all of us, wouldn't you say?
A huge lesson. Reminds us that we shouldn't be afraid to ask those tough questions, to speak up against injustice, even when it's coming from, people we admire or those in positions of power.
And it's something we see throughout Zubayr's life, isn't it?
Yeah.
He wasn't content with just following orders, accepting things as they were.
Always pushing, always seeking to understand, to learn, to improve himself, the world around him.
Embodied that spirit of constant striving.
Yes.
Now, let's go back to something you mentioned earlier, something that I think we need to explore a little more. His views on governance.
Oh, right. Dr. Suleiman really highlights that as a key aspect of his legacy. It seems Zubayr wasn't just focused on, the practical side of leadership or military strategy. He was really thinking about the theory behind Islamic governance.
So he was thinking about those big questions, those fundamental principles that should guide a just society.
Exactly. And his views, as Dr. Suleiman explains, were shaped by, well, his understanding of the Quran, of course, but also by his observations of the Prophet's leadership. He was especially drawn to the concept of shura,
Shura.
this system of consultation, shared decision-making.
So not a top-down approach, more collaborative.
Precisely. He believed that leaders shouldn't just rule by decree. They should seek out the perspectives, the advice of the community. Decisions should reflect that collective will, the wisdom of the people.
That's a pretty progressive idea, especially back then. I mean, even today.
I know, right? So many rulers just cling to power, make decisions without consulting anyone.
Exactly. And for Zubayr, this emphasis on consultation wasn't just some abstract idea, he lived by it.
Oh, absolutely. Valued the opinions of those around him, sought advice from his peers, listened to different perspectives.
A level of humility that's, well, often missing in those in power. He didn't see leadership as this right, but a responsibility.
To serve the community, not to command it.
And that's such a crucial distinction. Zubayr's vision of leadership wasn't about power. It was about using your influence to uplift the community.
To create a more just society.
It's a reminder that true leadership is about empowering others, giving them a voice, creating a system where everyone feels heard, valued.
A lesson just as relevant today as it was back then. It challenges all of us, whether we're in leadership positions or not, to really listen to those around us, value their opinions, work together for a more just world.
So we've explored his military achievements, his struggles, his political views, his family. What then is Zubayr ibn al-Awwam's legacy? How should we remember him?
It's a big question. He was more than just one thing. He was a warrior, a politician, a companion of the Prophet, but also so much more. A complex individual who I think really embodies that dynamism of early Islam.
A man of action, but also a man of deep thought. Loyal, devoted, fierce, but also a peacemaker. It's almost like his life covers that whole range of human experience.
And maybe that's the most enduring part of his legacy. The reminder that we don't have to fit into boxes. We can embrace our own complexities, our passions, our beliefs, just like Zubayr did.
He challenges us to be more than just observers, to really engage with our values, to fight for justice, to never give up hope.
His life was cut short, but his story still resonates, offering guidance, inspiration. He might not have achieved all his goals, but he left a mark that still inspires, still challenges.
So as we finish this deep dive into the life of Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, let's hold on to the lessons we've learned, the courage, the compassion, the loyalty, that pursuit of justice. Let's try to be a little bit more like Zubayr,
A little braver, a little more compassionate.
a little more dedicated to making the world a better place. And let's remember, even in these uncertain times, there's always hope, there's always the possibility of change.
Zubayr's story shows us that even one person can make a difference.
That one act of courage can inspire others, that speaking truth to power can spark a movement.
And with that, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the life of Zubayr ibn Awwam.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep finding inspiration from those remarkable people who shaped our world.